Welcome to Biz Alchemy, a podcast about creating a new business paradigm by women for women. I'm your alchemical host, Jacquelyn, and I'm going to take you on an extraordinary adventure to create a business filled with ease, fun, spaciousness, and abundance. Hustle, be gone. Let's birth a new way. Hello. Oh, I just know you are going to love today's podcast chat with Anita Kaiser. Anita has the most divine energy. You will hear it in her voice, in the way she pauses when she's speaking. The energy she emanates is beautiful and calming. And if you're an empath or highly sensitive person, she is the woman you are going to want in your life. This is a slightly longer than usual episode, and I could have kept talking to her. Anita and I have known each other for a few years now, and we do have a lot in common, both in the business world and outside of the business world. So I might have her back on again another time to explore more, especially in relation to nature and our connection to it. Because, as Anita so beautifully describes, she's a living priestess who loves practicing ritual and spending time adoring nature. And her favorite place is in the forest amongst trees. Like, she is so a woman after my own heart, but she's the Canadian version. I'm in the bush. I also love this way that Anita described her vision. She dreams of a world where we're all deeply connected to our emotions and no longer trying to be fine all the time. Oh my gosh, how often do you use that word? I'm fine. Oh, it's a horror. So I love that, Anita. Anita is an incredible coach for empaths and highly sensitive people. She brings some amazing tools into her business. But as you'll hear from our conversation today, it is her energy that is so healing and transformative. So enjoy this wonderful chat with the gorgeous Anita Kaiser. Anita, was there a turning point where you realized that you had to move away from the patriarchal model of business and create a new paradigm for your business?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question, and I feel a lot like I was bashing up against the patriarchal model of business my whole life. And then when COVID hit, I started to feel like, oh, this is what it's all about. Now I understand. Because during that time, when we all sort of went inwards because there wasn't another choice, I started to hear people really talking about this new earth and this new paradigm, and you being one of those people. And it just felt like, oh, now everything that I've ever experienced makes sense. And so as I continued then to, keep working with my nervous system and honoring it, the energetics just started to line up, and I felt like I could let go of the pushing.
Yes. I think COVID brought that gift to many people.
It's absolutely what I think as well. I mean, there's lots of people still struggling to shift that energy, right? But it did feel like so much clarity came in, and so much of the pushing energy, but also the things and the striving to keep up with the Jones, like all of that, it didn't make sense to me beforehand. But through that, I really started to understand and see, I'm here to do something new, right? And I could feel that with all of my being. And I think too, because we did that RV trip 2 years before that, and at the time when I did that, it's not like we planned it a long time in advance. We were like 2 or 3 months and then like done. And it really felt like it was urgent to go then. And so when I look back now, I can see how all these things sort of lined up there.
Yes, I think that's about the time we probably first connected. You were on the RV trip, weren't you?
Yes, exactly. And I think when it was around that time that I was starting the coaching business. And I knew right away that the energetic piece was a massive part of how I wanted to be doing business, which is how I connected with you, getting that energetic support that first year to help move things along. And, I had, of course, regular business help as well to create that base to rise up from. But the energetic piece was so important to me. And it's always important to me to line up with that.
So I'm interested, just going back a few paragraphs ago, you just mentioned about the nervous system. So just expand a little bit more on that, what you meant by working with the nervous system.
Yes. So for me, as a sensitive empath person with trauma in my history and just various different things, even just the patriarchal model of the world, it's not really designed for sensitive people, right? It's a very loud world, a very fast world. And my nervous system was dysregulated. So on the outside, I think it looked okay. People probably looked at the things I was doing and thought, I had it together relatively. And on the inside, it just felt like everything was too much, this constant state of overwhelm. I wasn't parenting the way I wanted to. I wasn't responding to anything the way I wanted to, which of course then meant I was just beating myself up internally. So having this massive fight all the time. So I'd say the past 3 to 4 years, as I've started regulating my nervous system, I can really see now that I have a handle on those things in a totally different way, where I'm able to see when I'm absorbing too much energy, let's say, right? Where I'm accepting other people's stuff and it's loading me down. But previously, I wasn't as aware when it was happening. And it's actually, it reminds me of when I was in a group of yours and I had to leave because every time I was getting off the calls, I was feeling not great. And of course, that's not why I was there. And that was all about my own energy, right? That I wasn't able to fortify myself. I was still too permeable somehow, right? And this, I think, is such a huge piece for empaths because mostly we're not taught about that when we're children, right? So we're just allowing the energy to come in. We transmute all the time, shift things, fix what's going on to the best of our abilities. And of course, as you age, that's a lot of burden to carry, right? So we have to fill that and regulate from the inside out. And so that's what that meant for me, to regulate my nervous system, so that now I know I can feel right away when I'm being pulled in, and then I can make a conscious decision, right? How do I want to respond here? Do I need to close the door? Do I need to leave the situation? Or, depend, maybe if it's my daughter, I'm willing, or in a session, I'm willing to offer up my nervous system to help the other person regulate, right?
Wow. So it's incredibly empowering, really, when you can become the observer, or as you said, when you have the awareness, because otherwise, and I imagine from what you describe and for many of your clients, it's just like this roller coaster of emotions that you judge yourself about, I would assume. You feel like there's something wrong with you and you're just so caught up in it that the observer is so far away from that. Is that what you find with your clients?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's exactly, that's what I felt like for most of my life. I felt like I was on a roller coaster, and there was so much shame attached to it because I didn't understand it. And in my family, I can see dysregulation going back many generations, right? And so the message, and I think many of us, empaths or not, we get this message, just buck up and get on with it, right? What's wrong with you? So that was definitely deeply internalized. And it took so much fighting against that before I could even see it, right? But once I saw it, of course, then, you can't unsee it. And that's when really I was able to find that softness and that acceptance for myself.
So, I mean, that answers the question a little bit, but I mean, how do people recognize that they're empaths?
Well, I think, for me, there were like these really sort of strange things going on where I'd be like driving and then I'd be crying. And I'm by myself in the car thinking like, really, okay, now I've really lost my mind, right? And so there were moments like that kept happening in random weird situations. And then I started to notice, oh, I would walk by like a 911 call on the street. There'd be ambulance and stuff. And I could feel the panic. And that wasn't my panic. I don't even know these people. I don't know what's going on in there, right? And so then I think like during that time, about 10 or so years ago, the word empath started to come out. And then one of the people that I was seeing for healing said, well, I think you are. And when I started to look into it, I was like, well, yes, that totally resonates. And so then really diving into that and just really acknowledging. So over the past few years, as I've done all this nervous system work, I can really see how, the sensitive nervous system, all our nervous systems need space, but the sensitive nervous system really, it just needs so much gentleness.
Yeah. And so is that what drew you to learn EFT, to learn tapping?
I had an experience with tapping many years ago, I guess 10 plus years ago, when we first moved to this city, when I was selling the eco store that we used to own. One of our customers offered me a session to help me out. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing. I thought it was so phenomenal. And so I've been dabbling with it for a long time. And then more recently, like 3-4 years ago, I trained in the modality because I've tried a lot of healing modalities, as I'm sure you have, right? Some of it's just because it's fun to go out there and play with things. And when you're working with healing trauma, like a lot of the things out there are re-traumatizing, right? Which then just brings it full circle again to what's wrong with me? Why isn't this working, right?
Yeah, fascinating. And I'm also interested because I didn't know you had an eco store. That's just added another dimension to who you are, Anita. And also it doesn't explain, but it also ties in beautifully with your connection with nature and your beautiful earth priestess energy that you have. And I'm also interested that connection between nature and empaths. How does nature support people who are empaths?
Yeah, I think for everyone, nature is so important, but certainly as an empath, that need for stillness is much greater, right? That need for the visuals, the sounds, it is just so healing. And I really think that when we don't have that, it's kind of impossible to be regulated, right? And I actually just want to share a quick story, Jacquelyn, because I was also a yoga teacher for a long time, right? And one of the first times I went to a yoga nidra, this yogic sleep, the woman was playing synthesized music, and it took everything in me not to get up and run out of that room screaming, because the music felt like it was grating on my nerves.
Wow.
And now I do yoga nidra all the time, but listening to earthy sounds, right? Drum beats, like the heartbeat, just things that are more natural. And so I don't know if I've answered the question, but I just wanted to share that.
That's an amazing thing to share, Anita, because I'm sure there's people listening who are empaths who are saying, oh my gosh, I never thought about that side of it. So just again, it's that awareness, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's right. If you're constantly moving, and this was something, that I noticed so much in the RV when we were traveling, because we were moving every 4 days, and having come from a yoga teacher background where at that point, I was pretty mindful in my life. I could see how just the fact that we moved every 4 days, it was really easy for me not to be so mindful, for me not to be grounded, even though we're living in an RV and I'm spending like 80% of my time outside. So it's just such an expansion of that awareness now, right? Like I'm in the forest multiple times a week. If I don't get out into nature over like a 7-day period, you don't really want to be around me then. Like I feel squirrely and edgy, and I need that connection. And I think there are just so many gifts that the earth has for us, and we need to be connected to it.
Yes. Amen. So you mentioned briefly about trauma. Do you think many empaths experience trauma growing up because of their sensitive nature?
Well, I think we have an abundance of trauma in the world. I wanted a different word because I don't like to use that word with trauma, but that was the only one that came in this moment. And I definitely think as empaths, as sensitive beings, the trauma it's hard for everybody, right? But it becomes so much larger, I think, for empaths. They have a much harder time processing it and really realizing that it's not about them. Codependency is a really big issue in empaths, and we hear about it a lot in terms of narcissistic abuse. But for me, I've experienced a lot of that just in terms of parenting, right? And this is because some of the traumas where things got coupled together that shouldn't have been coupled together. And so then as a parent, I just felt like it was my job to fix everything all the time. And that might be okay when you have a really small child, but at some point you have to know you're two separate people, right? And really start to work with that. And that sort of codependency, I've only just uncoupled in the past 2 years with my daughter. But I do have to say that I'm so thrilled with the relationship I have with her now compared to the struggles I was having before. And she's only 16, so I've got so much more greatness to go.
That's fantastic. And to bring, like taking what you just said, but to bring it back to business, because I do want to talk more about empaths in business, I'm imagining that codependent relationship could happen if you're in business working with clients.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is such a huge thing, right? I think it's important, especially if you're doing any kind of healing work, that you're getting your own support. And I think with an empath or a highly sensitive person, if you haven't done enough of your own work, you are constantly trying to fix things for your clients that maybe they're not ready for. Or it's just not even like, that's not the relationship. You can't fix it for someone, right? They have to do it themselves. And that was a super hard thing for me to accept, right? Because of course, like the ego gets involved and you're like, I want my clients to have this great transformation. And, I think that's reasonable, but they have to be ready for it. And if they're not ready for it, I can't do it for them. So really being able to sit back and trust and honor the other person's journey is a massive thing for the empaths and HSPs.
I'm glad that you referred back to that time when you were I think it was when I started a membership, and that you said, the energy, it's just too much, and we were thinking, well, what can you do? Can you turn your video off? And for me, that's really helpful to know that as well, that if being in that group environment, no matter how nurturing or whether you're doing meditation or what it is, can be challenging. And so then the fact that you're now in the playground and participating in the group calls and, in many ways, it's the same environment, but seeing the difference, seeing how you've managed that.
Yeah.
So, you've talked to what the change is for you, But is there something, what would you say, oh my gosh, this is what's really changed for me in that 2 years, I think it would be?
Yeah, I think really it's that regulating of the system and taking my power back, right? And really knowing that just because I can transmute the energy, can absorb someone's sadness, can help with whatever, doesn't mean I have to, doesn't mean it's my job. And it also doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, right? This having these boundaries and all of those things are like huge for an empath to come to a place where they can say that.
Yeah. So what other challenges did you encounter in business?
I think this, as this piece of wanting the transformation, right? And the more work that I do with the nervous system, the more I realize everyone has their own journey, right? And back when I was teaching yoga, someone had said to me they were going for some healing, and the person had asked them, how much are you willing to heal today? And they said something like 50%. And she had told me this, and I was so shocked, right, by this. You only want to heal 50%, right? Like I'm 100% all in, right? And I say that because it's just, again, about people's journeys, right? Sometimes people think they're ready for something, but they're not actually ready for what it really means for them, right? And I'm sure you see that all the time in your sessions. To get the information is one thing. To action the information is an entirely different ball game, right? And so, I think that aspect was certainly challenging. I'm trying to think of like the other challenges. I mean, it's so many different things that come up. Do you mean specifically as an empath in business?
I mean, as an empath, and especially an empath negotiating business, when that traditional model of business is still out there. The messages coming out there around business are the antithesis of what it means to be an empath. Yeah. So I think that's what I'm seeing, what you've experienced, and maybe what even you see in your clients, that the challenges they have.
Yeah. I think, sales is an issue for a lot of people, right? And as the empath, as the sensitive person, when something doesn't go according to plan, this I'm a bad person, right? This comes up all the time in sessions for all kinds of things that, as an outsider, like this is not at all about you being a bad person, right? But it feels like that inside because there is some piece of us that, I don't know, is operating with a program that says that's our job. I don't know exactly what that is, but really being able to know that it's not about us, right? I actually wonder now as I'm talking about this, because it feels almost like the sensitive energy, the empath, like it's almost like a collective mind somehow. I wonder about, different planets, now that might all come together.
Yes.
I don't have the answers, but I'm curious.
Go and sit under a tree and explore that with the tree, Anita.
Yes. And that is, the going out there, spending time in nature, watching the birds, the animals, like this just brings me so much joy.
Maybe I was thinking of you last night. I had a dream. I woke from a dream this morning, and the one bit I remembered was being amongst all these animals and being a part of them. Like, it's like they didn't even flinch, they were just so aware. They were aware I was there, but I was a part of them. But I also felt new to it. And I was a bit like, oh, how do I react around these animals? How do I respond? But they were just like, oh, this is normal to have her. It was a really strange dream. And I woke up going, oh, I feel like this is maybe what we're moving back into more, where we don't feel so separate from the animals, but we are just connecting the same way we would if a human was there. There's the same sort of interconnection. I don't know. It was strange. But anyway, when you just said that, it just reminded me of that.
Well, and it's absolutely what I think is happening, right? The separation, boy, that's done us well. I mean, I can't imagine who is standing there going, yes, let's stay separate, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I feel like, less separation with the plants, less separation with the animals, less separation with the earth, right? Like all of it. This is where we're going to. And this is why I love working with you, because you have that gift of sight that I don't have. I just feel it, and I feel it very strongly. And each time I hear you bring in a new idea, I run that through my filter and I know right away, yes, that's the truth. And now I'm like all ready to move with it. It's immediately, it becomes such a strong vibration. And it is, you've been talking about this remembering, and it's 100% what I feel like has been going on for me, right? And this is kind of where I started when I was talking about COVID. And it was just this allowance to remember the truth.
Yes. And as you say that, I see that this is the gift of being someone who is an empath. It's almost like, this is just what I'm feeling now as we talk, your connection to the remembering of that truth is actually closer. It's almost like there's less veils. And yet, when we're functioning in the current world, that's just incredibly challenging and indeed quite traumatic, because you can't be that close to remembering the truth. It's like you're not supported. There's no support there for that. I don't know if I explain myself very well there, but I can see it visually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's exactly, if you didn't have trauma as a child in your house, right, going out into the world where they're expecting you to get a move on it and, push through things and work crazy hours and do things that are ethically questionable a lot of the time, right? And that's a huge part of being an empath. Each of us has our own standard of ethics, but that when things are right, it is so important that there is this caring for the earth and the world, right? Like this is part of the operating system somehow. And that gets really skewered when you're out trying to fit in. When you look at sensitive and empath, and I kind of lump them together, they're not quite the same, but because I am sensitive and intuitive, that's why I lump them together. But I tend to be much more on the extroverted side, which is not generally the case. 70% are introverted. So I just want to put that out there in case people are listening and thinking that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would not at all identify with being an empath. I would never say I was an empath, but I know I'm very sensitive. And so that's the other thing. It comes back to that sort of lumping people into a category in a way.
Yeah.
Whereas actually what we're saying is you are more sensitive to energy.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, and to your environmental influences.
I always like the one thing I say all the time is that energy is my currency. It's always been my currency. And then just figuring out how to manage mine and what I don't want.
Yeah, exactly. So another question I wanted to ask was about, because you do offer group programs, and you certainly, I know I did your yoga one, which I just loved with the tapping, and I will be back. Does it help if you're an empath? Does it help to be in a group environment?
Yeah, I think the reality is it's better to start doing one-to-ones if you're ready to heal that, right? And I think, in yoga class, certainly you can absorb other people's energy, right? If you're not grounded in yourself. So finding a way to regulate first, then it's much easier to manage that. But that isn't always possible for everyone. So we operate in life in groups all the time, right? Whether it's in your work environment or somewhere else, even just family scenarios. But the more you notice how your energy is affected by others in different scenarios, right, then that empowers you.
Yeah. But I was also thinking it must also be a relief to realize that there are other people who feel the same as you, that's what I was thinking in a group, the support that would give, just going, oh my gosh, I am not alone.
Yes. Yeah. And that is 100% true, right? Especially if you've been in an environment where there isn't the support, where the, new agey or spiritual kind of stuff isn't the realm you're in. You're the one person in your community, right? Then it is very supportive to be with others who understand and have that same brand of crazy.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I know you do have an upcoming webinar.
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's all about understanding your sensitive nervous system. We're going to be talking about the differences in our nervous system and really getting into what being an empath, being sensitive means, and then how that plays out in your life, especially if you're a business owner, and what that might mean for you as you go there. It's April 26th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And there will be a recording if that is not a viable time zone for you.
Perfect. So how can listeners learn more about you and about that webinar?
On my website, AnitaKaiserWellness.com.
And so, Anita, do you have a takeaway to share with our listeners as we finish up today?
I think if you're feeling like the black sheep or something's wrong with you or you're too emotional, if you have any of those experiences on a regular basis, most likely you are an empath, and it can easily become your superpower.
Oh, I love that. And that's what you've found, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, Anita, it's been such a delight to chat with you. I could keep talking and talking. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jacquelyn.
Thanks for listening to Biz Alchemy. I'm Jacquelyn Atkins. If you'd love to know more about the energy of business, subscribe to my newsletter at jacquelynatkins.com/newsletter. And join me on Insight Timer, where I have a large meditation library and do regular live classes. Until next time, enjoy creating alchemy in your biz.